And you're on.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order with a roll call of school committee members. Jennifer,
Here.
Cassie,
Here.
Heather,
Here.
Bill,
Here. Couldn't hear you ask for Nick.
You're muted, Jan, but I'm here.
I don't know how that happened. Thanks. That was like gremlins again. John
Here.
and myself here. The public is invited to join the remote public sessions. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the public can access the meeting via the Montague Community Television broadcast, or we are also, we have people who would like to join in our Zoom audience may do so by accessing the link on the GMRSD website. It can be found under school committee notices and agendas for upcoming meetings, and it's under tonight's school committee meeting. The extension of the emergency open meeting law provisions were signed into law as Chapter 20, Section 20 of the Acts of 2021. The school committee reserves the right to implement additional remote participation procedures and will notify the public of these procedures as it is practical to do so. And we'd like to welcome visitors this evening. Good evening. We are also live streaming as well as broadcasting on MCTV, and a recording will be available later on MCTV and the district website. We'd like to welcome our Zoom audience. Please, unless it is your turn to participate and you've asked to be in the public participation, please keep your camera and microphone off. And this is time for public participation. Public participation policy BEDH has been reinstated to hold public participation remotely, and Tina will let one person in at a time so they may speak.
And we have a student from Gill, Fiona, who would like to speak first.
Okay, thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I hope you're having an amazing day. I wrote to say that you should keep the rule that kids and teachers wear masks at Gill Elementary School. That is the school I go to. My reason is COVID-19 is still happening, even if it is less bad. Also, it is very hard to catch COVID-19 if you are fully vaccinated, but it could still be really harmful for some people, like elderly people or immunocompromised people. And if people have their kids at school around unmasked people, they could catch COVID-19 and bring it back home. I also know there is COVID-19 testing, but only at the beginning of the week, and families can't individually buy COVID-19 tests every day. I know there's a chance that this won't happen, and we all want to help our community. Another reason is people who could get really sick from it will have a real hard time with less people wearing masks. I also would like you to think if there are less COVID cases, there might stop being as big and start being like the flu, which has bad years, but not a lot of them. Again, I will say there is a chance this won't happen, but it could.
Fiona's reading something.
You were in their shoes. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for joining us and giving us your input. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you. Next, we have Kevin, a Gill student parent.
Hello.
Hello, Kevin.
Thank you to the members of the GMSRD School Committee for responding to my requests for public comment this evening. As you know, I come here as a parent, and I am seeking feedback and information from the committee and or the GMSRD administration about a few areas. Tonight, I'll begin with the first order of new business on tonight's agenda, which is discussion about COVID mask expectations. I agree with the recommendation that if the town of Gill rescinds its indoor mask mandate, that all district schools become mask optional, effective March 21st, 2022. I also support the layered approach that the district has adopted in order to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in a school setting in accordance with the recommendation of DESE. However, I am only one voice as a parent in this district. And I can say that to my knowledge, neither staff or parents have been asked for input in a survey type manner on the optional mask policy recommendation and its implementation. Also, in regards to the extension of the emergency open meeting law provisions, the school committee reserving the right to implement additional remote participation procedures and will notify the public of its procedures as it is practical to, if there is a plan moving forward for that as we are voting on taking masks out of our schools. In regards to students, in particular those in the elementary schools, as we saw with our opening comment tonight, there is a lingering fear amongst students and parents in regards to COVID-19. And I believe that there needs to be discussion about how to best prepare teachers and staff to handle the potential social emotional effects on students once masks are no longer required in our schools. I'm mainly referring to younger children. However, these effects could arise from any age group of students. As a languages and communications teacher, I cannot stress the importance that kinesics has in human communication and its development. This nonverbal type of communication, whether it be body language, facial or body gestures, or really any type of movement, allows us to fully communicate with one another. And our youngest of students really know no other than a masked world, particularly in a school setting. Therefore, I ask that the schools, especially at the elementary level, provide some type of professional development to its teachers and staff as it relates to this topic. And before I move to the next two areas, which will be much more brief, I would also like to highlight a point in the layered approach that states all schools will continue to maintain ventilation systems, open windows, and employ air purifiers throughout the buildings. If there is one public health recommendation that has withstood the countless changes and updates to guidance throughout this pandemic, it has been that viruses are far less likely to spread amongst groups when those groups are outdoors, both masked or unmasked. You can all recall when for a time during the last couple of years that dining out actually meant dining out as in outdoors. And for a time, teachers were encouraged to have mask breaks outdoors with students a few times throughout the day. I really hope that the removal of masks should not be replaced with more screen time and all-day indoor learning. Aside from physical education class, students seldomly are outdoors during these crucial years of discovery learning. Plain and simply, students need to be outdoors more during the school day, and it is really a win-win in regards to mitigating the spread of virus while increasing learning opportunities and engagement for our students. With the final two, they are brief here, and I will wrap up. The second comment that I have has to do with the next order of business, budget discussion and vote. A few weeks ago, there were teachers from Gill Elementary School who read a statement to the committee that provided information in regards to special education staffing. Will next year's budget include the additional support? My final question is about the district's LPAC, English Language Parents Advisory Council. Has there been communication between the school committee and the district's LPAC? If these three requests for information could be addressed during tonight's meeting, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Just a point of information, because we don't always have all of the information on hand when questions come up in public participation, We will certainly make sure, I'm sure the superintendent will make sure any information that's available is given to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Okay, I think that was all, Heather. Did we have anyone else?
That was it?
Jane, can I just ask the last gentleman a clarifying question?
Sure, sure.
Thank you. Can you rephrase that last question specifically? What are you looking for around the LPAC? I just didn't get an opportunity to jot that down.
The question that I asked was, has there been communication between the LPAC and the school committee?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And next on our agenda, we have important events. When you're set,
Thank you.
Brian.
Sorry. Yep. So tomorrow, Wednesday, March 9th, is an early release day. And then Thursday and Friday, March 16th and 17th are also early release days for district-wide parent-teacher conferences. Wednesday, March 23rd is also an early release day this month for professional development. Wednesday, March 16th at 4 p.m. Friends of Sheffield will meet remotely. And I wanted to provide the dates through the next couple of school committee meetings for the Turners Falls High School production of Mary Poppins will be Friday, March 25th and Saturday, March 26th. Both the Friday and Saturday events will start at 7 p.m. And then on Sunday, March 27th, will be a matinee at 2 p.m. And that's it for events for this month.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the student representative report.
All right, hi guys. Things have been pretty active in the school community lately. Last week, we had a meeting with some of the school committee members and some e-board members, student council people, and just other active students in the school. I think that went pretty well. I think Jane, you were there, right?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, and that was really nice. We got to hear from lots of different voices that we normally don't hear from at these kinds of meetings, and just involved some more people who maybe even were in student council. At that meeting, we discussed the racism training that happened last week. We watched a video throughout all the grades called "I'm Not Racist, Am I?" And we did some discussion questions along with that, and that went really well. People were respectful, and I think we had some really good discussions because of that. There's a couple different fundraisers going on right now. The sophomores are doing penny wars, and that's been going great. We had some very entertaining announcements at morning meeting today with some of our sophomore class officers. The 11th grade is starting a pie in the face fundraiser where it's like a raffle, and if you win the raffle, you get to choose a teacher to pie in the face if they're willing on stage, and that's pretty fun. So I think everyone's really looking forward to that. I'm sure that'll be a great fundraiser for the juniors. Juniors are also currently working on prom planning for the seniors. I know that's going well. That's later in the year though. The 11th graders they're kind of busy. Wow. They were also talking about doing a Mother's Day flower selling fundraiser event thing. We didn't get too many details on that. It's a little ways away. Tomorrow we have 8th grade tours, and we have different tour guides. Some are on student council and some are just other members of the school community. And that's going to go really well, I think, because a little while ago, we had some 8th grade shadows where you had an 8th grader follow high school around for a day and just to see what the experience is like to stay here at Turners Falls High School. And so tomorrow that'll be similar, but in larger groups, and there'll be 2 tour guides for each group. And there'll be different like stations and classrooms you can go to at different things and activities. So yeah, I'm going to be a tour guide for that. I'm looking forward to it. So next meeting, I can let you guys know. Mr. Beck, he mentioned the musical that's coming up. That was the 25th, 26th, 27th. I'm stage managing that, and I can let you know it's going really well. It's going to be an awesome production, and I think everyone who can go should go. It's going to be really great. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you so much, Sina. It's always good to have your input.
Sorry, I made it blurry. Did she mention Read Across America
Oh,
or the
Right,
Extravaganza?
thank you.
Little prompter there.
Yes, thank you. We had the Turner's Falls Extravaganza. I can't believe I forgot to mention that because I mentioned it at the meeting last week with some of the school committee members. That was amazing. Also, it was a great after-school event. We had some middle schoolers, 8th graders specifically, come in and see different activity stations and clubs, events, different things going on in the high school that would inspire them to stay. There was food, and afterwards there was a game of dodgeball, which reminds me of the dodgeball tournament that's going to come up soon in the next few weeks. That's going to be great. I know everyone's getting excited about that. And oh yes, Reading Across America also happened last week. We there was some student council members. We went to Gill Elementary and we got to read to some of the different classes there, and I participated in that also. That was really incredible, and it's something that we're all going to try to do again as soon as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that all, Mom?
Thanks so much, Tina.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Okay, Superintendent's Report, Brian?
I wanted to start off with a couple of recognitions. Congratulations to the district and Turners Falls High School grounds maintenance and facility staff who were recently recognized by Pioneer Athletics with the Fields of Excellence Award for the exceptional quality and maintenance of our playing and athletic fields. I also wanted to recognize High School Principal Christopher Barnes and Assistant Principal Kristen Schreiber, as well as all of the staff, student, and parent volunteers who helped them to make the Turners Falls High School Extravaganza a great success. Last Wednesday evening, the high school administration, students, and staff hosted nearly 100 students and families at the first Turners Falls High School Extravaganza. As Sina had mentioned, the event highlighted a variety of high school programs, clubs, events, and activities, allowing students and families to get a better picture of the opportunities that are available for families at the high school. And the evening concluded with a student-faculty game of dodgeball. Since that night, we've received several communications from families who had a great time and who were filled with pride about our high school, our students, and staff. Thanks again to all those who helped make this a great night. That was really fun and exciting for everybody. I do want to also say that on a personal note, and as a parent here in the school district, that my wife and I don't want to say had to endure, but it went on for a long time. My son volunteered as a freshman. He volunteered at sort of last minute, and we thought he was going to get picked up early, and he ended up staying until about 7:30 and participated in the dodgeball game. He subsequently came home and chewed my wife's ear off about how much he loves the school, what a great time it was, how he wants to participate in more events like that. And so he had an opportunity to get to know staff members that he didn't otherwise know and hang out with some kids that he didn't otherwise meet. And I can't thank the students and staff enough for what they did, not just for the community, but for the students that night. It was a great event, and I hope that it's something that's done on a regular basis.
If I could say, I've heard so much in the community about how wonderful that was. I had another appointment, but it really was such a great idea. And I am very hopeful that it will be at least yearly, perhaps more often. I think that sort of thing is just amazing.
And also thank you to La Ciento, who helped us by providing a pretty significant number of chicken enchiladas. And for the students who made a great sign in advertising for those. Thank you to all the local businesses who helped us out. I also wanted to say congratulations to the girls varsity basketball team whose season recently concluded. But the Turners Falls High School basketball team advanced to the Western Mass semifinals this year. And what we are most proud of is that the girls had an outstanding season that culminated in their first Franklin County South League title since 1983. And they should be very proud of that accomplishment. I also wanted to offer congratulations to the Turners Falls High School cheerleading program. They had 2 competitions this year, placing 3rd in the Western Mass Division 4 competition, as well as 3rd place in the league competition. And this is the first time the team has been able to compete since 2020. So congratulations also to the cheering program. And also offer congratulations to Turner's Falls High School track coach Ron Hebert on his recent induction into the Western Mass Runners Hall of Fame. As our two of the folks that made public comment tonight had indicated that, you know, cases have gone down really precipitously across the state as well as across the region. Not just case counts, but also percent positivity. We'll keep our fingers crossed that decline will continue in that direction. The CDC, in fact, ranks the risk of transmission for counties in one of three categories. And Franklin County, as of this Monday, March 7th, was rated low risk of transmission for the first time in several months. Did also want to add that the 6-town Regional Planning Board will hold their next remote meeting. It's next Tuesday, March 15th. And that's at 6:30 p.m. and it's remote. And I also wanted to thank those school committee members who had the opportunity this past Friday. We finally did not have a weather event on a scheduled student meeting. And a couple of our school committee members had an opportunity to meet with high school students last Friday. And so Jane or John, I didn't know if this would be a good opportunity for you to make any comment about the meeting that you had with students on Friday.
John, would you like to?
I actually don't have notes from the meeting other than, so Jane, could you?
Sure. Yes, yeah. I know it was, fortunately, John and I were privileged to meet with the students. I know for some of our school committee members, because of their work responsibilities, they can't, unfortunately. I know they would like to, but that's really the best time for the students to be able to. So it was a pleasure as always. And I think Sina did a great job highlighting a lot of things that were discussed, the extravaganza and all the positive things that happened there, how the screening of the movie I'm Not a Racist, Am I went. There were some suggestions that they made about things that I think it's always really helpful to hear the students. John, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, some suggestions on the 6-town regionalization, maybe reaching out to Montague Report or perhaps on some of those issues. Mm-hmm. I want to say, I remember something actually much further back than last Friday. I actually knew Ron Hebert in the 1980s when I lived in Northampton, and I ran for Sugarloaf Mountain Athletic Club. And Ron put on a race every April, the Ron Hebert Road Race, that started at Kennedy Middle School in Northampton and went around down North Farms Road, which I think he used to live back in the 80s there. He probably doesn't remember me, but I remember Ron. So is he still the coach right now? For okay, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yep, he's the girls' coach. So if you want to surprise him by showing up, you know, at practice someday.
He might not know who I am. He probably forgot, but I remember him. So yeah.
Thanks, John. Yes, and our congratulations to the teams, the basketball, the girls basketball, the cheerleaders, the coach on his induction as well. Heather?
This might not be the time, but it's come up twice now, but any chance we could get a little debrief on how the meeting with the students went on Friday? Just that the virtual meeting that with the
they talked about the events that they've done, the movie on racism, and you know how maybe to reach out to you know what I asked them what could we do maybe to stop outflow, especially charters, and so they saw, you know, how can we talk up the school and so on, and the district.
Yes, and there was a suggestion, perhaps because of how well the local newspapers have been covering events for the schools, that it would be helpful for the students to have newspapers available perhaps in a couple of places at the high school where they could just pick them up and have access to them. I thought that was a really helpful idea. I think Brian's already working on that. And as Sina said, you know, we discussed about a lot of what was going on. It's always helpful to hear their impressions of things and how they our feeling about what's happening.
Always so insightful. Thanks.
It is. You're welcome. Okay, anyone else under that? All right, in that case, business and operations report, Joanne?
Hi, all of my items are in the business section, so I can wait until then to talk about each of them.
Okay, right. I didn't know if there was anything else, but I think you're right. Everything in here will be voted on or discussed in our business part of the meeting. So if
Mhm.
that's, oh, you can just join in then.
Okay.
Thank you. The next item is school committee reports, the warrant subcommittee approval. I will entertain a motion to approve the 2 warrants that we have all together, if that's acceptable to the committee. We have an AP warrant, which is accounts payable. The number is 3224. It's dated March 9th, 2022, in the amount of $304,881.05. We also have a high school student activity warrant. The number on that warrant is 3225, dated March 9th, 2022 as well, in the amount of $2,292.
Jen had her hand up. Jane, I don't know if you
Oh,
saw.
I'm sorry. I can't read and look, so thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. I just have a question that I've never asked since I started so long ago on the school committee. So these warrants come up and I've sort of been blindly approving them because I assume that they're items that just get approved. But I'm wondering, I'm wondering, are these items that correlate with the approved budgets, or are these additional, like, is there a way to, I've looked through the warrants and it's a lot and I'm not that smart, so, I do my best, but like, are there, particular, is there a way to tell when looking at these warrants if they're already on the budget that's approved, or if they're not, and if they sort of are outside of that?
Okay, I think that's a good question. And the community probably wonders too, what is all this? Joanne can explain it better than I am, sure.
Yep. So the student activity warrants are not part of our budget. That's the students raising money and then spending money. And that's your approval of them spending that money. That's theirs money because they're the ones raising it. And then the accounts payable warrants would be within our budget. Typically, if something is outside of our budget, we would bring a transfer to you to transfer money between types of lines. If it's all within the 2000 series, which is instruction, there could be some adjustments within those budgets from time to time. If the principal says, I need more textbooks or I need more professional development, and they're moving money from one line to another within that 2000 series, then all of that fits into the budget. So, as they build the budget, it's a big number. And so there's a lot of things in it, but they're not, when they build the budget, they're not saying we're going to need this many pens and this much paper and, specific items. They're figuring out what they need as they go along through the year. And then they work within their budget to make that work. So you receive transfers that adjust the budget if they're moving from one function to another. But you also monthly, you receive a list of transfers that we've made the previous month that are within those budget functions. So yes, if it's the AP warrant, it is within the budget.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So moved.
Okay, Heather moved
Second.
and Jennifer seconded. Any other questions?
So little point of discussion. Thank you both, Nick and Sabrina, for changing the format of the agenda. It is very helpful to have everything separate and easy to find when we have the discussions.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
think it's
yeah, I think, I don't know if,
work.
I don't know if there were any sort of snags that came up, but just overall in terms of feedback, was everybody able to access the documents and
The links.
okay, so it works in terms of adding that layer of accessibility. This will work better for people on the committee. Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you for that recommendation. And I wanted to say also thank you to Heather for her recommendation and to Tina for organizing the process, training me, Joanne, and Sabrina on how to do it efficiently. So thanks, Tina.
Yes, thank you. So we have a motion and we have a second. I will take a roll call vote. Jennifer,
Yes.
Cassie,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Bill,
Yep.
Nick,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you. Moving on to the business portion. The first item A, is a discussion about the COVID mask expectations. And there is information in your packet about that. Brian?
Yep, I'm hoping that Melissa, who's here, is Melissa Bednarski. Melissa, are you in the meeting?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So Melissa and I have been meeting with the Pandemic Response Advisory Committee. Melissa has also been communicating with local and regional health officials, and I've been consulting with area superintendents as well. And as I mentioned in a previous meeting, we didn't feel like it was responsible, given the data that we had coming out of each break over the last 2 years, that we've had increases in cases in the community coming out of extended vacations. And so we wanted to just put this on hold for a period of time, in addition to the fact that we needed to wait for both towns to rescind their town mask mandates for indoors. The town of Gill is meeting tonight. I don't know what the outcome of that meeting will be, but given that Boston has ended their indoor mask mandate, I'm hopeful that Gill will move in that same direction. And we're making the recommendation. Attached to my report is a letter from Melissa Bednarski that I'll ask her to speak to a little bit. But to move the district to begin being mask optional on Monday, March 21st. And the reason for that date is it gives us a good 3-week window to not only examine data, watch our own case counts in the district, but also allows us to be able to get past the parent-teacher conferences, which are held on the 16th and 17th. And that will just be another 8 school days away. And the letter that Melissa wrote to the committee is actually the foundation of the similar letter that we'll be writing to families after we meet with the nurses tomorrow. The mask policy, the mask expectations that we have in the district are not a policy. They've not been voted on by the school committee. For those of you who are new to the committee, I had asked the committee to give the district the ability to not be constrained by policy and with regard to making changes to masking. And this came up last year in the spring as the science changed to indicate, as one of the public comments had highlighted earlier tonight, that masking stopped outside and our athletes were in a situation where other schools had removed masks outside. So that flexibility allowed us to be able to remove masks during outside activities last year, and it remained in place as a mask expectation. So there's no reason for the school committee to vote on this unless the school committee felt like there was a consensus on the committee, either that they want to take that away from the district decision and take it back, or that there's consensus on the committee that they would like to look at another date as an alternative. But again, our recommendation is for Monday, March 21st. So at this time, I'd like to ask Melissa Bednarski if there's anything that she would like to highlight from the letter that she wrote to the school committee to consider this, and just see if anybody has any comment.
Hi, sorry about that. Putting me on the spot, Brian. I didn't expect to talk tonight, but that's okay. Yeah. So yeah, you have the copy of my letter, and in it I just highlighted that there's, the evidence is out there, as Brian said, that the numbers are going down. There's evidence to support our decision, our recommendation to go mask optional as of March 21st. You know, we've had lower hospitalizations. There's new, the new numbers are looking good. As Brian said, again, our areas in the low category now, which hasn't been for a number of months. There's new antiviral medications and treatments now available. The severity of the illness is now, we're seeing much lesser severity when someone does get COVID. And just most importantly, that we're just seeing a decrease in the positive cases. And we have a higher percentage of those that are vaccinated now. I did reach out to the Board of Health and got some numbers, and it showed around 72% of Franklin County residents are now vaccinated. And that includes around 75% of those 5 and older is the data they gave me. Yeah, I think that's about it.
And I do also appreciate Melissa making mention in her letter, and we will also be focusing on this in our communication with parents and with students, emphasizing, as they are in other school districts that are either have made this change or are in the process of following a similar timeline as us. I'm sure people have seen in the news the confrontation between a prominent political official and some students. We need to make sure not only does that not, I'm certain it won't happen with our adults at all, but we do need to make sure that students are not applying peer pressure to one another for those who are choosing to remain masked when we move to mask optional. And we trust that our students will take that on, but we do want to emphasize for students in particular that there are many families, as another public comment had made, there are many families where there's an immunocompromised or otherwise, a family member has a health condition, and those students are going to want to work to protect their family members. And so we want to make sure that everybody's going to respect people's choices with regard to the mask optional approach after March 21st.
Right. I mean, while the numbers are all going down and things are all looking good, COVID isn't going away. We are moving from a pandemic to an endemic, and we have to adjust and move on and judge by the numbers and make our decisions based on those and what, using the data, what we can manage going forward, and recommending that we do mask optional, but keep other safeguards in place, as was mentioned in this meeting earlier, where, the windows stay open and other mitigating strategies are still in place, even though we are going mask optional at this time.
Thanks, Melissa.
As Brian mentioned, we did not institute a policy, but we asked the administration and nurses consulting the CDC, the boards of health, everyone to determine the progress of this. But I certainly want to give the committee opportunity to weigh in on, how they're feeling about it. John, do I see your hand?
Yeah, I was wondering if when we go to mask optional, will the district provide masks for students and staff who would request them?
Yes, we do still have an inventory of surgical masks, as well as some of the KN95 that we've provided for staff. And so we very likely have enough to get through the remainder of the school year. However, and we'll keep those available in the same locations in each of the schools throughout the remainder of the school year, and perhaps even into the summer program for those, depending on what advisories, what the data looks like and what advisories there are heading into the summer. The overwhelming majority of staff and students, however, have chosen to continue to wear their own masks. And so there's a balance between the two. But yes, we are providing them.
Okay. Anyone else? Nick?
I just want to say, first off, I am completely against lifting the mask mandate on this timeline. I think it's too early. I think that, you know, when the weather warms up a little bit and we have the opportunity to have more windows open and more air circulating, it would make more sense. But I think that the reason that transmission within schools has been so low is because we've had masks required. I also take issue with the way the statistics are presented, because yes, 75% of people age 5 and older are fully vaccinated in our county, but only 51% of kids 5 to 11, which is our elementary school students, have 1 dose. So that's just the point that I wanted to make, that our vaccination rates for especially the elementary school kids are pretty low still.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Point, yes. Anyone else? Bill, did I see your hand? And then Cassie?
Yeah, you did see my hand. I had a couple of thoughts. One was, I think we should bring up the fact that it isn't just open windows, but the district actually invested a lot in air purification and HVAC systems to bring them all up to standard to transfer a lot of air every minute of the day. So we have a lot of circulation in our rooms, in our buildings, and the district has done that. Another thing is, I have grandchildren, and over the past 2 years, they've had to wear masks a lot around not only other people, but myself. And I don't see the anxiety. Maybe it could be just my grandchildren, but I don't see the hesitation to take a mask off or put one on. They seem to live very comfortably with them. So to me, that isn't really an issue, but I understand people bringing it forward in their presentation. And then I did also want to say, I believe you mentioned in Bednarski's letter mentioned that free test kits are also being given out all the time still. Is that correct, or was that a different section? And I mean, that's just an aid for people at home to check whenever they want to on the district, because we're going to provide them the test. And then lastly, and I'll close with that, sorry, Cassie, to take up so much time, but the last one, it's fleeted, you're on.
If it comes back to you, Bill, let us know. All right.
No worries, Bill. So I just want to say, you know, I think that working in a school and, you know, also serving on this committee and being a parent, I have a few different thoughts about this. You know, we're going to mask optional. There's still going to be a number of people that wear masks, and that's going to be done on their comfort level. And I know that our teachers will do whatever they can to make their students comfortable. And I want them to be comfortable as well. I do feel like, you know, the masks, you know, we've found have only worked so much. And I think that we're in such a different place than we were when the mask mandate started. And I think that it is our job also to sort of weigh out the risks and benefits of having our kids masks for a prolonged period of time, because there is a lot of social and emotional damage that I will say masks have done to our kids, whether we know it or not. And so I think, you know, we can't keep them on forever. And I don't want to sound insensitive to those that are concerned, because I work in a school and I'll still be carrying a mask with me and wearing it depending on who I'm with and what their comfort level is. And I'm okay with that. But I also think that that's something that we need to think about. You know, what our kids, you know, the stress that does put on our kids and their social skills, you know, that their mental health. So anyway, that's just my thought. I support the 25th or 21st, excuse me.
Thank you, Heather.
You don't want to know what I believe. No, since the flu has been pretty much non-existent for 2 years, and that's not for no reason. But regardless, I do believe that going optional is a good idea. I particularly want to highlight, and this is, I'm kind of wearing my parent hat. At the elementary school, kids having to have silent lunches is crushing my son. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, so I just want to say that, like, that's a big problem. It's just very hard, at least in that one instance. But Cassie brings up a good point. What if a student is uncomfortable with a teacher not wearing a mask, vice versa? Like, are we going to have a friendly agreement that if someone's uncomfortable and they say, would you mind please wearing a mask, that either party will do so? Just a curious something to think about.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. It is. Bill?
It came back to me.
Good.
I was gonna ask and that's actually related to what Heather was just talking about, is the one thing that wasn't brought, that could be brought forward, is the teacher's control of their classroom in respect to, if a teacher wanted everyone in that class to wear a mask in their presence in order for them to teach the class, would that be fair? And as opposed to trying to work with a student who thought everybody around them should be wearing a mask. But nonetheless, it's to me, it does bring up the issue of teacher in control of their room, which in the past has been an interesting and rather important issue for everyone to deal with. And it may also, if you did that, it might encourage our staff to go with the policy, the change in policy, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Jennifer?
Hi, thanks, Jane. I don't have an opinion actually necessarily about yes or no. I will say that as a sort of not exact comparison, UMass just tonight said that as of tomorrow, they're no longer requiring masks inside, but I will say also that they require every student and every staff and faculty to be not only vaccinated the first 2 shots, but also boosted. So it creates an environment that is, in theory, safer. But I will also say that the transmission rates, even though that is the environment, were really high when it was high everywhere else, but seemingly not as devastating potentially as if the environment wasn't vaccinated. I've read lots of things and none of them are really aligned well enough to say for sure, apples to apples, but I'm just offering this as apparently this giant population feels confident with taking this kind of step. And again, it doesn't compare necessarily with children who aren't vaccinated, but I just wanted to offer that as information.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anything else, Brian, before we move on?
No, I mean, I heard Nick clearly. I do appreciate that. And obviously if things turn around, we've had, we get our second set of pool tests coming back, but coming back on the vacation, we didn't have any pool samples that had any positives. We've had a low number of positives in the school, and again, declining rates in the community. And I'm going to be spending some time with the nurses tomorrow to have a little bit more of a conversation around things like, the CDC removed all mandates in terms of distancing related to even eating and so on and so forth. So we need to have some conversations about, you know, how do we phase back into degrees of normal with lunches and other circumstances. And there was a good question that was raised. A teacher cannot compel their classroom to wear masks in a mask optional environment. So that was a good question. However, you know, on the other side of that, if a student had a request of a teacher who was going to be within 6 feet of them to wear a mask, you know, that's, as Cassie had indicated as a fellow educator, I certainly am going to respect that. And I'm going to expect that our staff would do the same. I don't think that that's unreasonable. It's not going to be for an extended period of time. But, you know, if there are it's mask optional for everybody. And it's not something, once we move to this, that we're necessarily going to be policing unless we're dealing with the yo-yo effect of, oh, geez, you know, there's a cluster, there's an outbreak, and we need to do something differently. By having this not be policy, the district can actually act pretty quickly. You know, that if we needed to do something and we needed to shift gears, and I'm hopeful that that won't be the case, that we could do so. Cassie?
I just had a couple questions that just popped into my head, and Melissa might be better to answer these. Is there going to be a change in protocol in terms of sending symptomatic students home? And will we be requiring students that are showing symptoms to wear a mask? And then are there certain areas of the school, such as the health office, that masks will be required?
Hi, yes, because a health office is considered a medical office, just like when you go to your doctor's office or to the hospital or anything, you'll still be required to wear a mask when in the health offices, as will the nurses while working throughout the day in there. And nothing will change as of right now. There's nothing changed in the policy or the protocols that DESE put out as far as symptomatic individuals will still be following the same protocol to dismiss a student that has symptoms that are on the COVID symptom list. The only, and then if somebody does return to school following a COVID illness, they can return on day 6, but they must maintain good mask wearing for an additional 5 days when they do come back to school. So that will not be a mask optional time. That will be a time when they are required to wear a mask.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks, Melissa.
Jennifer?
So who is in charge of policing that? I guess just the teacher in that classroom. I mean, that feels like maybe a lot. Like have a calendar of like, you came in 5 days, 3 days, 2 days. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's easier than I'm thinking it might be. But
I'm hopeful that we're in a situation where it's going to be the nurse that's going to need to communicate. And for elementary students, it's a little bit easier for the nurse to be able to send out because it's largely a single teacher. At the secondary level, you know, they'll need to be able to look in the student information system and find out who the 4 or 5 high school teachers are to indicate that, you know, a student is returning from COVID. Hopefully, you know, what we're seeing now, even coming off of this vacation, is that we have very few cases in district. And so hopefully we're past the surge and we won't see very many circumstances like this. But yeah, it's going to need to be a communication that's going to have to come out from the nurse to the educators to just indicate, you know, Billy's returning from being positive and is going to have to wear a mask until next Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll need parents. Parents obviously will get that information from the nurses as well.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else before we leave the subject?
I just want to say thank you to Melissa for all of her extra hard work in the last 2 years. It has not been easy to be a school nurse as of recently. So thank you, Melissa. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
And Brian, I mean, we're lucky to have you too.
I'm not a health official, so.
Well, seems like I think it's a tough discussion. I think unfortunately, when it comes to things like this, I see both sides. I understand, why people would feel they want it still on and why other people feel they want it off. I do understand it. It's difficult. But I think emphasizing the optional part is important. We didn't say there'll be no more masks. We
Right.
didn't say that. And I have full confidence that our staff and our students will be able to understand that other people will need masks at times, and that's a good thing. I don't, I think it's important to focus on that. I was a bit disappointed in when the first news reports came out when DESE and the CDC said there's no more masks. You don't need any more masks. I think it was too broad a statement, and I think it gave a lot of people the wrong impression about what still should be done in circumstances. So I think it's important to focus on that a lot.
And that was a challenge also with regard to transportation. The bus company, Pam Leopold, sits on the Pandemic Response Advisory Committee here in town, and she's been a great resource for us, not only to keep us informed, but for us to be able to ask her questions and for her to be able to provide information for us. And in our most recent, one of our more recent communications, I did add in after the vacation, after the CDC had lifted the transportation mask mandate, they had people in town showing up, kids showing up saying, well, we heard on the news we didn't have to wear masks on buses anymore. And so while that got sorted out, there were lots of circumstances where, bus driver had to hand a kid a mask and say, you can't get on the bus unless you're wearing a mask. And there was confusion. So yes, the news made it very difficult for a pretty short period of time. So, now having control over it as a district and being able to put out clear communications will hopefully have everybody have an understanding of what we need to do to support each other and continue to keep each other safe as we move into a very different environment.
Mm-hmm. And we will keep the item on our agendas as we go along so that they're updated as anything.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I will add too, there are schools, very large schools in Eastern Massachusetts that came back on February 28th. There are a couple weeks worth of data in those school districts. And I'll actually have 3 total meetings. One will be a full day in-person meeting with superintendents from around the state to be able to ask the questions of those many districts who removed the mask mandates as early as February 28th. How's it going? What have you seen? What's happening in your district? What are you doing differently? So that, and buying that time instead of doing it next Monday or on February 28th gives us an opportunity to, to learn from others who decided to take that action sooner. I just didn't feel like it was responsible to do it sooner than March 21st.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, the next item we have on the agenda is a discussion and vote for the fiscal year 23 budget. And Joanne.
Okay, so we've worked out the budget, and in your packet you have the revenue. You can see the black subtotal, which is your operating and capital budget. That's the number you vote on. And all the numbers below that on the revenue portion are other funds, but we provide them to you so that way you can see the whole picture of the budget, but you don't vote on those. At the bottom of the first page is the budgeted expenditures. The general fund, again, the black number at the bottom is the general fund. That's the number you vote on. And then the other funds are listed there to get to the all funds budget. On the back of that sheet, you can see the 2 town assessments. This town assessment meets Montague's affordable assessment, and for Gill, it is a lower percentage than what Montague's affordable assessment was. And then we have the budget vote language. So we need to vote on the general fund budget, but we also need to vote the amount of E&D we're using. And so that language is there. And then we'll have the vote to reestablish the transportation reimbursement fund and to propose the $200,000 budget there. And so in the black boxes, you can see the language for the budget votes. And I also included the detailed line item budget, which is attached there on a separate link. And that's each line item within the budget by school, by function category. So your vote is on the first page and it's based on the function categories. And that's why when we have transfers that cross over those function categories, those are the budget transfers that you vote on. But if they're within the budget categories, then you don't vote them. You're just informed about them.
Thank you. So I will entertain a motion to vote the budget. I can read the wording if that makes it easier for someone to move it. The first motion is I move that the Gill-Montague Regional School Committee approve a fiscal year 2023 general fund budget of the big number is harder. $22,985,805. This includes the use of $250,000 from E&D to support the budget. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Heather, thank you.
Second.
Second,
Cassie.
Kathy, thank you. Any discussion about that? I'll take a line item vote. Jennifer?
Hold on one second. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to look at all the items before. You're asking for a yes or no vote
I'm
right
sorry,
now?
a roll call vote. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Roll call. That was my.
Yes.
Thank you. Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yep.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself. Yes, and for a budget vote, we need 2/3 of the total members of our committee. In our case, that would be 6, and we had 7. So that's an acceptable vote. I just wanted to mention that in case people were wondering. And the other item is, again, I'll read the wording and then I'll take and entertain a motion. Move that the Gill-Montague Regional School Committee establish a regional transportation reimbursement fund. The proposed budget uses $200,000 from the Regional Transportation Reimbursement Fund to support the budget.
So moved.
Cassie and Heather second. Any other questions about that?
I have a question. Sorry,
Sure.
can you tell me more about that item?
Sure. This is a new fund that was established maybe 5 years ago by the Department of Revenue. And they said that if we have excess money in our transportation that we receive from transportation, regional schools, we can take some of those funds and put it into a revolving fund and use it to support next year's budget. So we did this last year and we hadn't done it for a few years. We had a gap, but we are moving 200,000 this year into that fund so that way we can use it for next year. And we're doing that because we're doing it this year and it really is just increasing it by $50,000. But the money has to be spent the next year.
So does that mean this is for money, like circumstances that weren't anticipated, or are we under budgeting transportation? I know that things come up. For example, the person who was at Smith Vocational School and then moved to Montague and now but that's a Montague town fee or charge, not a school committee charge. So I'm trying to think of a situation where this would be utilized.
Right, this is not for emergency purposes. So the first year when we established this fund, it's if we have a year in our budget where we're flush, right? We have a year where we're in good shape. Then, and we're thinking next year is not going to look good. Then we can take money because we're flush and we can set it aside in this revolving fund, sort of like another form of E&D or free cash. And then
I'm just wondering, like, when you say you think it wouldn't look good, like what would be an indication or what kind of shift would occur that would make it not look good in comparison,
Right. So 2 years ago, we received a lot of Chapter 70 revenue excess, and our state our town assessments were high. But then when we were working our way into fiscal 22, we got our chapter 70 number, and fiscal 22 said, you're going to be just about flat next year. You're not going to get much money. We're going to lose
Oh, I
money
see.
here and there. And so we knew that fiscal 22 was going to be tight. And so we took money from fiscal 21 because we had some excess because we closed the school down early. We took some money, we put it into that budget, and we were able to use that for fiscal 22 because we knew we were going to be tight. So doing this a second year in a row is really just moving the money that we already are getting into
Okay.
there. And it's sort of piggybacking on the prior year's hardship. So if you look at the expense lines, you'll see that we budgeted the entire $200,000 as part of our transportation expenses. So it's just taking it out of the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
I think the questions are helpful in general, Jennifer, because budget is complicated. And the terms that people use in explaining budget for most of us are not as helpful until Joanne explains what they mean, what it all means in the long run. Any other questions?
Bill
Yeah.
has a hand up.
Bill? Yeah, thank you.
Joanne, does the money that can be allocated into that transportation revolving fund, can it come from anywhere, or is it coming out of the transportation budget?
It's coming out of the transportation revenue. So the revenue that we receive from the state for transportation reimbursement, those are the funds that we can use to put into that revolving fund.
Okay, so the reason that we had surplus funds was because we stopped having a bus service, which we had already budgeted for, and that's where the money came from. But then it has to be applied to next year's transportation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thanks a lot.
Right. And transportation reimbursement's also a year behind, right? So when we stopped busing the students, we still paid a fee for those buses to be on alert, but we stopped busing the students at the end of fiscal 20. So we had some excess. We were receiving our reimbursement from fiscal 19, right?
Yeah.
Based on what we spent in 19. And then when we were going into fiscal 21, we knew that we were going to be a little tighter because now our reimbursement is going to be less because we spent a little bit less money in fiscal 20, right? But we also spent less money on transportation in fiscal 21. So now when we look at fiscal 22, right, the current year we're in, we spent less on transportation because we didn't have buses running for the majority of the year. But the reimbursement was from the prior year. So this current year's reimbursement is lower than we would like. So next year's reimbursement is going to be larger because this year we had buses all year long. So next year's reimbursement is going to go up pretty significantly. And so, you know, this is a continuation. Again, like I said, we're increasing it by $50,000. So the net loss out of this current year budget is $50,000. We're basically taking $50,000 from this year's budget, saying we want to hold on to it for next year. And it's going to go into this fund to do that.
Any other questions? Thank you. We have a motion and a second, so I'll take a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yep.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And me. Yes, thank you. Okay, the next item is we need to approve some banking resolutions. Those are also in our packet. And Joanne, if you would give us the short version of that.
Okay, so the banking resolutions allow Cynthia, our treasurer, to go to the bank and add people or remove people from being signatories on those accounts. And so the changes that we're making on the first, well, the updated resolutions for all bank accounts, for all banking powers. So on this one, we're removing Mike as the assistant treasurer and adding Heather. I believe that is the only change we're making on here. But we also added Unibank. It's another bank that we have that we receive online payments from people through. So we added that, removed Mike, added Heather. And then the second one is the student activity accounts. And so we are removing Melissa Petra, who is resigned from the district, and adding Joanne Jagir, who is going to be the interim principal. And we're also adding Kristen Schreiber as the assistant principal at the high school and middle school. I believe this one also removes Mike and adds Heather as the assistant treasurer.
Yes.
So every year you vote these, and typically you would just do it once a year, but because we have changes this year, we're needing to do it again. Otherwise, they can't write checks.
Right. So we have to update those as we need to.
Do we have to vote those separately, Jane?
That's my question to you, Joanne. Do we need to vote them separately? Probably. I think
You
so.
might as well. It wouldn't
Yeah.
hurt.
And would you give us the wording that you would prefer?
Sure. I think you can use the line regarding, so the first one would be updating resolutions for all bank accounts and banking powers for the Gill-Montague Regional School District for fiscal 22.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Cassie?
Second.
Second. Jennifer? Any questions about that? And we'll need a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And me? And the second one?
The second one is updating the resolution for bank accounts and baking powers at Greenfield Savings Bank for fiscal 22. And this is for our student activity accounts.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Cassie, thank you. And a
Second.
Jennifer, thank you. Any discussion about that? Okay, roll call. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Gill sixth grade field trip to Nature's Classroom. We need to vote that as well. There is a packet in your larger packet. Hello, Mr. Grout. He is the sixth grade teacher.
So
Anything
Dave,
you'd like to tell us about it, Dave?
Sure. Can you guys can hear me? Yeah.
Mhm.
Good. So yeah, this is resuming a program that we had before COVID, where we would go to Nature's Classroom for a week, leave on a Monday, come back on a Friday, and the kids learn a whole bunch of science topics using nature to explore learning. They're outside almost the whole time. And they also do a lot of team building, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't gone for 2 years because of COVID, but they have opened back up. We are not going to the same location we've gone for 20 something years. They didn't open that location this year. So we will be going to a place in Southern Connecticut, in Ivoryton, Connecticut. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing. It's 4 nights, 5 days. So yeah, I'm open to any questions you have about it. In your packet, I think I included all COVID information that they provided to me, and all the current information at the time. Some details are still being worked out, but that's what we got.
Thank you. I also see that Lisa Desjardins, who is the principal of Gill School, has joined us. Hi, Lisa. Anyone have any specific questions? I know the packet includes the details for the trip, and as David said, it includes information about their COVID policies. All of the forms otherwise included are necessary for any overnight field trip that a class takes. Lisa, anything you'd like to add?
No, I know that this is a trip that Mr. Grout's done for a number of years, and it's very well organized. We'll have supervision by the 5th grade teacher with the girls, and Mr. Grout supervising the boys. And so I know that they'll do a great job. And I'm also glad that the students are having an opportunity to have this culminating event for their 6th grade year. It's been a long time since we've been able to do that. So I'm hopeful the committee will be okay with it.
Thank you. Any other questions before we take a vote? The committee does need to vote this. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the Gill 6th grade field trip to Nature's Classroom.
I'll move it.
Second.
And Heather? Any other discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Jennifer?
An emphatic yes.
Cassie?
No.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself? Yes. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion and a possible approval of the 2022-2023 school year calendar, which is also in your packet. This is the first look at this. Any things you'd like to point out on it, Brian?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I wanted to point out as highlights. And the committee certainly can hold on to this until the next meeting. I know that Jane had made me aware that it's not always approved at the first meeting, but often discussed. So if the committee doesn't wish to take a vote tonight, and we can put it back on the agenda for the 23rd and give a longer period of time to look at it. Staff would be, in this proposed calendar, staff would have their first 3 days, their prep days, professional development, starting August 24th. Students would again have it start off with shortened school weeks. So grades 1 through 12 would have their first day on August 29th. We then wanted to again go with a 4-day weekend around Labor Day and have another 4-day week of school to integrate everybody back slowly and give families, that 4-day taste of summer after, getting into the building for that first week, with half days for pre-K and kindergarten to begin on September 6th, and full days in the first, even in the first full week of school, beginning on September 12th. We did also move parent-teacher conferences from November up into October, not only because in our discussions in the administrative team, we wanted to be able to use parent-teacher conferences a little differently than they have been in the past. It's fairly traditional in most school districts for parent-teacher conferences to be arranged around times when report cards come out. For us in this school district, parent-teacher conferences are really difficult to align because the high school, middle school is on quarters, and the elementary school is on a trimester schedule. So as we discussed it over the course of 2 admin team meetings, one of the things that really became clear to us is parent-teacher conferences are not necessarily designed for the purpose of reviewing report cards. Parents can look at report cards, can make individual phone calls. It's more about building relationships, in the educational relationship and the individual educational relationship between the parent and the teacher. And so moving it up a little bit earlier in the school year and a little bit earlier in the second semester in March as well will give us a better opportunity to establish those relationships shortly after open houses occur. We then, another aspect, I know last year, or for this current school year, last year the school committee granted us 4 additional half days for the purpose of training staff and analyzing student data, knowing that we were trying to recover lost learning. So this calendar removes 2 of those days for next year and anticipating removing the other 2 data days for the following school year. But we can target those 2 days for November 16th and I believe February 1st are the days for half days. So there's 2 fewer early release days in this calendar than there are in this school year. We are also looking at having no school on Friday, December 23rd, as well as Monday, January 2nd. There's 2 reasons for that. One, we want to give a slightly longer break for families. Some families travel during the holidays, and we wanted them to make sure that they had a vacation that was about 11 days, which is pretty normal. But also staff holidays will fall on those days, and it would be difficult to staff the buildings. We'll have to grant a holiday for January 2nd because the New Year's Day falls on a Sunday. So we would come back in January with a 4-day school week. And then wrapping up, last day for students right now is currently scheduled as Monday, June 12th, anticipating that we would have 1 or 2 snow days, or, hopefully not more than that. And that's basically it. Those are sort of the big differences from perhaps from previous school years, or at least from this past school year.
Any particular questions? Bill?
I think it's great that you're throwing in those extra days. Seriously, the extra days on those weekends and making 4-day trips out of it. But other than that, it's all good to me.
Thanks, Bill.
Just a quick question. It just may be a typo under the start and end dates. I hadn't noticed it before. I apologize for not mentioning it before the meeting. It says September 7th, the first day for pre-K and kindergarten, and then under it, it says pre-K half days on September 6th through 9th.
Yep, you're right. That's a typo. So that should say first day for pre-K and kindergarten should say September 6th.
I think, yeah. So maybe if it's acceptable, we'll just bring back the amended version for our next meeting, if that's okay with everyone. And then we'll, make sure that, it's hard to get all this data on a calendar and in one place and transfer it. So if that's all right, Brian, we'll bring it back next time.
Absolutely. So I'll include the updated one in the next packet. And
great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, moving on, we have item F is addressing issues of equity, and I think I see Jean with us for that.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Jean.
I'm going to share my screen. So I just wanted to give you a brief update on some of the things that have been happening within the district related to equity, specifically related to diversity and equity, and just highlight 3 areas this evening. Went too far. So as you've heard tonight from a few people, that we did get to our screening of I'm Not Racist, Am I? We had planned this from last year, where the staff at Great Falls Middle and Turner Falls High School viewed this video, and then a number of staff members requested to be trained in order to bring it to the students. So the racial justice group is a group of staff members, faculty and staff, who volunteer to meet once a month. They've done a lot of the legwork in this. So it was last Thursday, and we received positive feedback from students a few students mentioned to their facilitators and advisors that they weren't really sure if they wanted to see the film, but they're really glad that they watched it. Some said they wanted to see it again because they feel like they could process it even more after watching it a second time. So next steps related to this work, student leaders met today, those that were trained as leaders. They weren't facilitating with the staff, but they were a handful of students that had previewed the film with 2 staff members so they could be really supports for their peers. So they had a debrief today during lunch. Tomorrow during the staff meeting in the afternoon, the staff will debrief how it went. The racial justice group meets this Thursday afternoon after school. So again, another debrief to be able to process and discuss next steps. The advisories in the next couple of weeks will be continuing to build on this. There are some additional follow-up and support for students to process, as well as to talk about, change and things that they might want to see different happening in their school. And the racial justice group has recommended the purchase of, it's called the American Dream game. It's an actual board game where you kind of take on a persona, you take on a character, and that character has specific demographics, and it kind of impacts how, or shows the impact of how different people kind of move through the world. So the idea is that we purchase these and it becomes an advisory component for these games. And it is really it's a fun game, but it's a true learning lesson. So overall, it's been a great experience, and the racial justice group, again, is volunteer staff who volunteer their time after school once a month and have done a lot of work. So it's very powerful to see this moving forward. The other item is professional development. So this year we put together 3 dates. There was one in October, and then February, and now March, where we have looked at diversity, equity, inclusion, professional development. So elementary staff will be finishing their 3-part series called Brave Elementary Educators Talk About Race. That'll happen tomorrow afternoon, and the staff from the collaborative are the ones who have been facilitating that work. And secondary staff will have a second virtual training with the Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth, which is titled Conversations About Race. So again, another virtual training. The Massachusetts Partnership for Youth is an amazing, Diane Ellis is the one who brought us to them. And it's just, they have amazing professional development for staff. So, and finally, for the professional development, one of the things I did in October, right before we had our first district-wide professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion, was I did a survey to get a sense of where people were with their own learning and how they viewed themselves and their colleagues in the district. It was an anonymous survey, and they're actually going to take the survey again this Wednesday, so tomorrow after everything. And the goal is to see if there's been any growth. Every time we do professional development, we get feedback from staff on how it went. And the goal of this is to see, we've dedicated this time and put a lot of effort into it. We want to know if people are growing in this way. So that'll happen tomorrow, and happy to report back to the school committee once I have the results of that survey. And then the last piece was a book study. So in mid-January, we put out a book study for a textbook. It's not a textbook, but it's a book from Heinemann Publishers. It's called Start Here, Start Now, A Guide to Anti-Bias and Anti-Racist Work in Your School Community. So this is optional, a voluntary commitment. And so we had 26 members of the staff took part, and there were 6 different groups that met 5 times each. So we had 30 meetings. Each group met 5 times, and you can see kind of the breakdown of who took part. So we had 3 administrators, 3 staff from Hillcrest, 3 from Gill, 4 from Sheffield, 6 from Great Falls, 3 from Turners Falls, and 4 who are district staff. So again, this is volunteer, and this book is recently came out in 2021, and it's an educator from, I think she's out in California. And it really just gives some quick how to put things into action, learning things, discussing things, and then how do you kind of bring some of this to really recognize student identities, as well as things you can do within the curriculum in the community. So we actually wrap up this week. We've got 3 more meetings, 2 tomorrow, 1 on Friday, but from the ones that have finished up, there were just some reflections. Everyone did a feedback. survey. So the one is, I'm listening to my students for more opportunities to engage in conversations with my students that open doors for equal opportunities for all students. This book was an eye-opener in ways to approach ABAR, so anti-bias, anti-racist. It is only a starting point to get the wheels rolling. This was good to do in group study to be able to hear and share other points of view. And the third quote that I pulled was, my mind was stimulated by this book and I learned to be more conscious of how children may feel about themselves by the images presented in literature I read to them. So again, this is just another component of what we're doing to look at equity across the district. And again, a voluntary book club, and it went really well. It was the first time that I ran something like this. And we're going to make it a yearly thing to dig into text. I've asked for some feedback on different types of topics that folks would want to dig into as a group. So those are the three areas that I just wanted to highlight tonight for everyone. Any questions?
Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned that there was a survey to sort of measure growth. Based on your presentation, it looks like there was a survey taken at the beginning and then at the end. And I'm just curious, what kinds of questions? Was it self-reported growth? You know, I'm just curious, like how you were measuring that.
Sure, I have to look up the exact group that I borrowed some questions from, but they do a diversity, equity, inclusion kind of a self-assessment. It's really questions about how you see different components of race, how you think, you know, how you interact with colleagues, and how you see your district. So it's a survey that's been done in a number of schools, and I can get that information and share with you. I'd have to dig into my notes. So I didn't write any of the questions. I borrowed those questions from a survey that exists. And it's anonymous. And the way we're measuring the growth is I set up a key. So people put in, you know, like the last initial of their first name and the first initial of their street and the date they're born on. So, you know, everyone gets their own code. So then at the end, they fill that information in again, and I can compare them. That way it's completely anonymous and nobody shares. I don't know who fills out the form. But if you like, I can get that for you and send it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, but I'm sort of interested in the metric, like how, I don't mean to get in the weeds. I'm just more curious in a self-reporting environment when the goal is to broaden, I imagine it's to broaden the perspective or perception and also to perceive the benefits of inclusion. And I'm more curious, just, yeah. So if you want to send me something at a later point, I'm just more feeding my own interest in this topic.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be happy to.
And Jennifer, if I can just add a piece of that, really the idea of the survey and doing a self-assessment and having that be something that's really needs to, in perpetuity in some way or another, to be on our plate, you know, whether it's new people coming to the district or people who have been through these trainings. This is not a stagnant topic. It's something that we'll continue to work on. But as the district began to do this work, you know, we started in two different places, at the secondary level and at the elementary level. Those conversations, that work, that preparation to take on those topics and go through that training can be really difficult. And so it's really helping people to assess their comfort, identify their own gaps, ask for more professional development in particular areas, so that it really will help us to be able to continue to allow people to move forward instead of just expecting, oh, well, they've had a PD session, so now they get it. You know, people have to look at, what did you get out of this, you know? If that makes sense.
I mean, it's interesting because you sort of have to identify a baseline that, you know, I mean, you're asking the same questions to a group of people. So you have to sort of identify a baseline, and pretty much everyone has to fall in a similar spot, right? And then you're providing some metric for deciding whether or not the exercise has increased on some metric, some way of deciding whether or not it was beneficial. And I'm just sort of curious, what is the process for which you are deciding what that is? Or, you know, again, not maybe a topic for now, but more just I'm interested and I'd like to learn more.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll say that, you know, it's part of my professional practice goal is one of these is I'm using this as a tool because, you know, one of my goals is to, you know, increase growth of these areas and, you know, and thinking about, okay, so we put together these professional development opportunities, both PD as well as the book study and other areas. So that's where the survey came out as far as trying to determine, you know, how am I going to measure growth of this? I get feedback from PD, but how is we really going to measure growth in these topics? So yeah.
Thanks very much, Jean.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. We appreciate it. Okay, the next item is appointment for the open Montague School Committee seat. And I believe we have the person who sent in her letter of interest with us tonight. Gary, if you could turn on your.
I'm assuming she was going to say video.
Oh, Gary, you moved.
Unfortunately, I believe I froze just as I was speaking.
Yep.
Okay, Gary, if you could turn your camera on.
I don't have a camera.
Oh, okay, but your voice is perfect.
Great.
We can do that.
All right.
Gary Turn has sent us a letter of interest to join our committee, and we're very happy that you did. Would you like to say anything to the committee about yourself?
I was glad that you decided to put the vacancy in the paper. It in fact was how it turned out, even though Mike is a near geographical neighbor that he had passed. A lot of respect for Mike. And if I understand correctly, it's a need that the committee had indicated to fill his spot until May of this year.
Yes, it's occurred to me as we were going to appoint you tonight that actually the two towns usually hold their elections in May.
Yep.
They can sometimes change the date. I think during COVID there were some changes, but otherwise it's in May. And actually for people who want to run for a full term seat on the committee, which we would hope you would do because your term would end at that election, which is coming up in May. And for people that would like to run for a full term, this is the time that they will be picking up nomination papers from the superintendent's office and getting signatures to be on the ballot.
I understand.
So here's hoping. In the meantime, we're glad that you've joined us now, and I will entertain a motion to appoint Gary Turn as our newest school committee member.
I'll move that.
Bill, thank you.
Second. Welcome, Gary.
Heather seconded,
Thank you.
and we're very glad that you're willing to join us. I will take a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself. And so that's unanimous. And we will be in touch with you, Gary, to arrange a time for Brian and me to give you a short orientation.
Appreciate it, Jane.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item, we need to approve the retainer for our district legal counsel, and that needs to be a vote as well. The retainer letter is in your packet. I'll entertain a motion for that.
Move it.
Bill?
Second.
And who seconded? I'm sorry.
Heather.
Heather, thank you. Any questions about that? That's something we need to do every year to renew the retainer for our legal counsel. It's the Dupree Law Offices.
Jen has a question.
Okay, yeah.
I
my-
always have a question.
Well, suddenly my
I'm just-
email's got a little connection and my audio, so thanks.
I'm just curious. So is there a process by which we seek, do we just keep continually hire the same attorney service, or do we ever seek like bids, or how does that work?
We generally do renew with the firm since we're satisfied with their work. I believe Joanne might, or Brian might be able to correct me if I misspeak about this. I think this law firm is the legal firm for the largest contingent of school committees in this area, if not a good part of the state. Joanne?
Yes, I believe they have a lot of clients. And so the only complication is if we need to fight with a different school district and they have the same attorney. So.
Right.
And so is there every year, does it go up a certain percent, or do they maintain their same retainer, or what is that? And is there a benefit to I guess if you understand that kind of law, it makes sense because you already know the rules, but I don't know. I'm just always sort of curious about the possibilities of not doing the same thing that we've always done, just for the sake of that we've always done it.
Yeah, so the Dupreys are every school district where I've been an administrator out here in Western Massachusetts. I've worked with the Dupreys, and I found them to be incredibly responsive, very flexible, and extremely knowledgeable with a huge number of school districts and circumstances that they can share information with us. It was incredibly valuable for me in looking at in addition to the fact that they're located out here in Western Massachusetts, whereas most of the other law firms that serve just some Massachusetts school districts might not specialize in educational law, and are also serving school districts in the eastern part of the state. And so it's more challenging for them to send somebody out in person when we get back to doing in-person meetings. So, I mean, that's just been my experience with them has been great. I don't know if there's any specific changes to the retainer for this year. I don't think there was a change in fees from the previous. I only have 1 year to go on from the most recent retainer, but I don't think there were any changes in fees. Diane?
I've actually worked with the Dupreys before in other districts that I've been in. And then I worked in a district where we had an hourly retainer, and it just, you start seeing those invoices coming in, and like for each phone call, each email, each communication. I do feel like it provides, I don't have the financial information of what our retainer cost is. That is something that, Joanne and Brian obviously have in the school committee, but I think it provides the school district a predictable set of expenses and expertise. And if we have been happy with their service, I haven't had any concerns relative to some of the legal issues that have come up with everything from homeschooling to, special ed, transportation questions that I've had to ask the attorney about. So, thank you.
And I think I've found since I've been on committee, as Brian said, they specialize in school law, and they do have 3 lawyers that are available for guidance or to come to meetings. And one of their lawyers, Russ, is a specialist in the open meeting law, which is really challenging. I know when I first became chair, if I wasn't sure about some item on the open meeting law or something else, Russ was always available. I could just send him an email or call him and ask him the question to make sure we were doing things the right way. I think that's a real convenience, as well as it's comforting to know that, I don't stumble into those areas that I don't know about. Jennifer?
Yeah, totally. Thanks. Sorry, it's not my place. I wanted to ask Joanne a question. How do I do that? Do I ask? Yeah, so I still want to, the question I asked was about the money. Like how much is it, is it costing more this year than it did last year? And if, is it costing like more also for the year? Does it go up every year or?
Yeah, I think typically it has been going up like $50 a month, which, really is nothing in lawyer speak, right?
Okay.
So
Awesome.
I think our fee this year is $1,600 a month.
Yes.
I don't have it. I don't have it in front of me. So
Okay.
you may all
Thank
have
you.
it in front of you, but I'm pretty
Yes.
sure it's $1,600 a month. And they did say in the language that something was not going to be included anymore, but it's not something that we typically use. So, I'm not too worried about that. And $1,600, we really get our money's worth out of this contract.
Awesome. I appreciate everyone's comments. It's one of these areas where I don't know enough to make a good decision, right? So it's sort of one of those sort of general trusting the professionals, which are you folks.
Thanks, Bill.
I just wanted to throw in that Russell has said quite often that they represent over 70 districts, which would be approximately a fifth of all the districts in the state. So they're certainly well used.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, we'll need a roll call vote. We have a motion and a second. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And me, yes. Thank you. That's unanimous. And the last item on our business portion of the agenda is we need to approve a 20-year contract for a 10% electricity discount on all solar credits. Joanne, let's tell us.
Okay. So our energy person contacted me and said, hey, this is like a no-brainer. You should take a look at this. Now, I don't usually look at things that are no-brainers and say, oh, wow, this is just falling in our lap. This is something we just have to do. But if it's a 10% discount, and it truly is a 10% discount on our energy, and we don't have to put solar on our property, we're just buying into a solar farm and without any cost, right? We're not paying anything up front. We're just locking ourselves in so we can get this 10% discount up to a certain number of kilowatt hours. Then it seemed like a reasonable thing to do to discount our cost. But I'm just never sure about these types of things that seem like it just seems too good to be true. Why would this be out there? Right. So I'm not terribly comfortable with this. I don't know if anyone has any familiarity with solar and have more to say. I've given you everything that I got from Ken McCants from Yolon Energy. He's the one that shared this with me. He said that we can use this for our own personal electric as well. Anybody can buy into this. So there's no fee. We sign on for 20 years. We can cancel, but it could take like 6 months for that cancellation to become effective. And we save 10% on, I guess we would save 10% on our full electric bill at Gill and at Hillcrest. And then we would save 10% up to a certain number of kilowatt hours at Sheffield in the high school. But because they're above the cap, we wouldn't save 10% on the full bill.
Jennifer?
I guess well, I don't know if this is a good place for an attorney to review this, but also I would say, do we know what happens like when we go past the allotted kilowatt hours? Is that clear? Because I'm with you. I mean, I have no idea. And 20 years feels like a really long time.
Yeah.
To make this kind of commitment. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I would say let's try to get more information if we can.
Yeah, I can call him and ask more questions and maybe come back to you at the next meeting. Maybe I can have him come and explain. what this is. When he explains it, it sounds really good, you know, but when I explain it, I'm just not sure.
Heather?
But is this something we would normally ask an attorney about to review before we make this kind of commitment?
We
Again,
would ask them to review the contract. When they sent us a contract, we'd have them review that, but you know, we could check with them and see if they have any other clients that have signed into this solar contract. But typically, you know, deciding if you want to do it or not based on the information we have here, the attorney wouldn't weigh in on. What they would weigh in on is the contract language acceptable?
I think I saw Heather's hand and then Bill.
Yeah, I'd like a little more information, I think, but it isn't crazy to me if I think that the length of the contract is exactly why you get the discount. Yeah, for just signing up for so long. So, but yeah, more info would be great.
Bill?
I'd want to know whose rate you're getting the 10% off of, first of all. And then secondly, what is the kilowatt hours? How many kilowatt hours do we use in a year? You have that information.
Yes.
So you would know how soon you get cut out at the high school and Sheffield, you said?
Right, they're larger.
And I really don't, I agree the 20-year contract seems to me a bit much, but I think more information, if you bring it forward, would help me think about that in maybe a more positive way. I don't like the whole thing, mostly because, well, we don't need to go into that, but I want more information. Thanks a lot.
Would you like it if I could ask Ken to come and talk about this at the next meeting?
Is he available? This
I
is
can
someone
ask
right
him.
local.
It is local. Yes, he's local.
He's
I
been
mean, I guess personally, I wouldn't mind if he would come as long as he understands that we don't want a typical sales pitch.
Right.
Want to ask him a few particular questions. We can give them to him ahead of time and say, these are the things we need to know to make an informed decision. I mean, I can appreciate people have to sell their product, but that's not going to help our meeting be efficient.
Right. Okay, I can check in with him and ask him to come and let him know that he should not try to be a salesman.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, they're just say, we just want you to answer these few questions.
Yep.
You know, we're fine. And I mean, I know I do have a friend who did a similar sort of thing as a private citizen with her electric bills. And in her case, they give you a little refund every month.
Walk behind you.
And so that sounded interesting, but she couldn't really explain all the details about it. So.
I think
Okay.
that's a different situation.
I think it is. I think it is.
That
very
sounds
different.
like net metering, which you have the panels, but any of them.
She actually doesn't, no.
Oh,
She
all right.
doesn't have anything. She just said she signed up for something and they give her money. So, I mean, nobody's usually unhappy about that. Heather?
It looks like it's through Solstice, so it looks, you can go to solstice.us. It looks like for a lot more information, so you can give that a check. I mean, they're actually pretty big,
Okay.
but that's just from my brief thing, so.
Okay, so I think the general impression we're giving is that, Joanne, what you said would work. We could ask him to bring us some specific information about things we're wanting to get the answers to.
Okay, and I can put together the kilowatt hours that we use typically for each building and what those caps are. The high school would probably be about a quarter of the electricity that we use, that we'd get the discount on. I think somewhere in that range. Sheffield might be close to half.
Okay. All right, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I do not see that we have any minutes at this point to approve for this meeting. Any agenda requests, please feel free, check with Brian, Cassie, or myself. We're trying to have our agenda plannings on Monday night if possible, to give the district more time to get the packet information together. And again, I appreciate I appreciate Nick's suggestion about how to improve access to the packet for the members, and people seem to feel that's helped. I think that's great. Thank you. Our next scheduled meetings are Tuesday, March 22nd and Tuesday, April 12th. That being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Was that?
Sorry, that might have been too fast. Heather.
We're quick. I will give you credit for that.
Second.
Jennifer, second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, we'll take a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Bill? Thank you. Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And me. Thank you all. Good night.
Everyone.